So hello everyone, I'm Tin Bejar of by Tin B and welcome to my Tropical Botanicals workshop. This final lesson will be more complex as we will be applying all the lessons that we have learned in the previous classes. Feel free to browse through the old lessons to refresh your memory in creating these techniques. In this video, we're going to paint a very unique tropical plant which is called the birds of paradise. And in painting this, we'll be using multiple techniques such as the graded wash, the wet and dry, using wash as watercolor, and adding details to our illustration. Now, prepare your materials and let's get started. So this is the artwork that we will be painting for our final lesson. It's a tropical flower called Birds of Paradise. So it's named as such because its blossoms, when fully opened, resemble the wings of a bird in flight. For the main plant, we'll be using the graded wash technique and also for the leaves, and some glazing technique for the flowers. But before we start with this illustration, let's discuss the materials that we will be preparing for this class. For the paper, I'm using Strathmore Ready Cut watercolor in cold press in the size 8x10. For the paints, I'm using my Merry Blue watercolors in gouache. Specific for the leaves and the upper part of our main plant, I'll be using Sap Green gouache. And below it, I'll be using Carmine gouache. Then Caladium yellow medium watercolor for the base wash of our flowers. And the second layer will be more of a combination of yellow and orange. Then rose madder for adding some shadows. And lastly, for the small petals, I'll use permanent violet blue watercolor. For the brushes, I'm using Princeton Aqua Elite in 1, 2, and 4. And for the palettes, I'll be using ceramic palettes. And of course, 2 cups of water, 1 for cleaning the brushes, and another 1 for my clean source of water. And lastly, a tissue wherein I can dab my brushes for better water control. So start with the light sketch of the artwork. You can access this artwork reference as part of the instruction list of this class. So let's work on our main flower bract, which looks like a boat or a bic. So it's going to be painted in green for the upper part and bright pink below. So we'll be applying a graded wash technique here, but this time shadows or the thick mixture would be on the edges with a highlight at the middle. So start with a thick wet mixture of carmine on the edges and using a different brush, soften its edges by adding water. Then add more water and let the two mixtures meet at the center using our highlights, making it seamlessly blend. And as you can see, we were able to show transition from dark to light using the graded wash technique. Next is to apply the same technique at the upper part of this flower bract using Sap Green gouache. So don't forget to leave out a thin line in between them to show division and so it wouldn't bleed with each other. So now let's move on with the unique shaped sepals or flowers of the birds of paradise. These are actually composed of multiple erect pointed petals in yellow, orange, and red. So for these sepals, let's start by creating our first layer of wash. So using cadmium yellow medium, I'll apply a thick mixture on the left edges per flower, then use a different brush just to blend it with water to show like a dark to light transition. Take note that this first layer needs to be very light and transparent, and we can build the colors by adding multiple layers to it later on. We'll be applying the glazing technique in these flowers, so we need to dry them out first. So as we wait, let's move on with the leaves. So for our leaves, we're going to use the same approach, which is the graded wash technique. In this illustration, I'll add the shadows or the thick mixture of sap green on the edges of the center and lower veins. We're still gonna do it section by section and leave out thin spaces to show the veins of the leaf. Once done, we can move on with the other leaf. Now that we're done painting the leaves, you can add our second layer for the flowers. So first, check if it's already dry out, and for the next layer, we'll prepare a mix of cadmium yellow medium and permanent orange. So what I'll do is I'll leave out a small thin portion from the first layer and do the same approach as what we have applied earlier. This will allow us to create better dimension and depth to our elements. Idea here is to show light and dark portions of the flower so it doesn't look flat. This will show our midtones and our highlights for our flowers. So wait for this layer to dry out before we add our shadows. Again, we'll be using the glazing technique here so the mixtures won't be bleeding with each other. So in this final layer, it will allow us to make the shape of our flowers look more defined. So we're gonna add shadows at the bottom of these petals. I'll apply a thick mixture of rose madder on the bottom part of each section, then blend it with clean water. This wet and dry technique actually allowed us to show dimensions in our illustration. As we can see, multiple tones composed of our yellow base wash for our highlights, our orange midtones, and rose madder as our shadows. Let's wait for this layer to dry out before we paint the mini petals of our Birds of Paradise illustration. So what we'll do with these two small petals is we're just gonna add the thick mixture of violet and leave out a small portion at the center to add like a hollow section to it. So we're done with our Birds of Paradise illustration. We're able to learn how to apply multiple techniques in our artwork. We've used the graded wash, somehow a variegated wash, and the wet and dry technique. So this marks the end of my workshop series, and I really hope that you were able to enjoy creating these floral illustrations with me. I'm excited to see the artworks that you have created, so share it in this website or tag me at ByTinB on Instagram. Feel free to cue in your queries as well so I can aid you in painting these floral illustrations. Once again, this is Tin Bejar of ByTinB. Thank you and see you in my next classes.